How do fractional CMOs hit the ground running? Hi, I'm Dean Way. Welcome to Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. There's a lot of variety in how they kick off a new client engagement. In fact, there's so much variety, it's valuable to just listen to what opportunities they look for, what they tackle first, and what they wish wasn't true when they start a new project. So let's find out. Pete, hi. Imagine that you started like a new 1-year engagement. Okay, you're the fractional CMO. We'll talk about early wins in a moment. But first, what problems do you typically see, or what problems do you normally look for on day one? And tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Dean. Just first a little bit about myself, and then I'll roll into the questions. So, for those who don't know, I'm Pete Jarvis. I'm founder of Triton Marketing, where I work as a fractional CMO alongside a team of senior marketers. I'm originally from Manchester, in England, but now I'm based in Spain. Leading brands across different marketing disciplines, paid search, SEO, above the line, brand positioning. And then I work in B2B and B2C. I'm probably 70-30 split towards B2C at the moment. So to answer the question, I'll firstly start with the relationship with technology. I think that marketing technology has become so important, and MarTech has become such an important part of marketing as a whole, that nearly all the marketing disciplines are touched by the relationship with technology at the moment. So I would want to meet them first, or the agency or the development team. And as an added bonus, tech people are pretty unfiltered to tell me the truth about what's going on from day one.
Yeah.
So I always find that's a great place to start. I would also say to have a quick check through the budgets, which will obviously be available either through finance or through the CEO, and just go back through some.
What are you looking for when you're going through the budgets?
Just go back through the recent spends and ask, is there analysis based on what's been spent? So just take a random item. So just pluck one out and say, okay, for this thing that happened 6 months ago, is anyone able to give me a report? Or, what went well, what didn't go well with this piece of spend? And if they're not, then that obviously belies other problems to do with reporting or accountability within the team. So I found that's a good place to start. Just spot checking, basically, that we know what happened to some of the things that went out the door.
And yes, hi. Sorry, Pete. I'm going to get back to you in just a second. So, so along the same lines, okay. Like also, hello, and we should tell the audience who you are. But besides what Pete said, are there any like typical problems that you like to look for right from day one, or you typically find?
G'day, Dean. Thanks for having me. Just a little bit about myself as well. So recently I founded a tech company called MediaSync. I've worked as a strategist or as a CMO in a number of different industries like industrial manufacturing, lasers, semiconductors, a little bit in augmented reality. You'd think augmented reality is my favorite, but I really enjoyed like things like lasers and industrial waste management. They're a lot more. These kind of companies, they're a lot more complicated to market because they're a lot more challenging. And I guess I'm a little bit of an engineer at heart. So I like the more complicated, more techie kind of companies, especially at early stages. Yes, like Pete said, I will also look at technology, especially feedback loops, to understand how information is being sent back from the people working in the weeds and everything that's happening up to the management, up to leadership. What I also look for is an understanding like strategic elements as well. Even before I get to things like budget, is what's the vision of the person, like the CEO or the board who's actually bringing me on, and do they have an understanding of strategic components like their own, not their sales messaging, but the messaging that they want to, who their audience are to begin with, and then how are they not the channels that they're dealing with, but what message they want to get to their actual audiences, if they even got some sort of direction with that, and to see if their goals and their vision is actually something that is realistic within that time period, especially for a fractional. Sometimes you need a full-time CMO to deal with certain types of goals, and some can be done by a fractional.
Okay, yeah. Actually, I don't think I've ever had anyone give me that answer about full-time versus fractional, like when they show up. Okay, cool. Pete, sorry, I interrupted you there. I had sort of a pop up, and I apologize for that. So, do you want to finish out on the problems you like to look for when you kick off?
No worries at all. Is that it's actually going to what Yuz was saying about achievable objectives and long-term objectives. It was actually the next point I was going to make, just to add to it, really, is I affectionately call it Monster of the Week. So Monster of the Week is when the business is chasing whatever scheme is in vogue over the last few weeks or so, and there's no sort of long-term strategy. So just looking in and asking the team, asking the CEO, okay, in the last month or so, what have we been working on? And then saying, okay, that's great. Well, what strategy does that map back to? And if there's no answer to that, then it means that, yeah, the business is just chasing its tail, and it's not actually following projects and tasks that map back to a strategy that is defined with a defined objective and defined goal. And that's a trap that a business can fall into quite a lot following pet projects. So identifying if there are any of these Monster of the Week style cycles that are going on that don't seem to produce anything in the end.
Lately, I hear the phrase "random acts of marketing," and that seems to be right in that category. Hey, yes. So let's pivot then. That was problems to look for. What kind of early wins, if any, do you like to try to put up on the scoreboard in the first 90 days?
Sure. So most of the clients that I deal with typically are early stage. So some have existing marketing infrastructure and some don't have any marketing infrastructure to begin with. So it kind of depends on which one. If they have an existing marketing infrastructure, the first thing that I will do is just audit everything, and I will try and make improvements while I'm dealing on the strategic level. I will, for the overall strategy, I will deal on just with what's going on and see if there are micro improvements that can be made that can have as big as possible wins. If they don't have any infrastructure, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's more about showing them that there is progress. So trying to, as I go through the process of building that strategy, to get them incorporated as much as possible, having some sort of short-term ideas that can be leveraged onto that can act as some sort of tangible, where they say, okay, you're actually making progress and you're actually moving towards the goals.
And Pete, what about you? What kind of early wins do you like to put on the board, or that you look for?
Probably the most difficult one, and the one that's always best to start with, particularly if you're being brought in as a fractional CMO versus a full-time one. It may well be that you've had no predecessors, in which case the CEO has been managing marketing themselves with the help of a team. So actually working working with the CEO to remove them from that process, basically, which can sometimes be quite emotionally painful, right? Because it's been their baby for quite a while. Explaining what's gone well, what's not gone well, and where we're going to go, and once that's done, is the kind of encouraging the CEO to take their hands off the handlebars a little bit with marketing and go off to focus on sales or technology or whatever other area needs their more undivided attention. Now that you have part-time CMO in the business, so that's generally a win. With a rare exception when the CEO has a background in marketing, in which case it requires a different approach. But normally that's not.
That is such a good point. So I wanted to move off of that one for just a minute. I want to explore it a bit. So, I mean, you've been a fractional CMO. You've worked with various clients. With the exception maybe of the CEO who came from marketing, right? What do you find? What do clients not normally know about or see in their marketing or their business until you start working there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think Yiz touched on it earlier on when he was talking about audience. I have had what from an outsider might be a slightly ridiculous conversation about audiences with a CEO who has a vision for his business that is or her business that's very strong in their head, but actually hasn't been properly road tested against an audience. So, nobody's actually run these ideas past, a client base or a knowledge panel or anything like that. And it's just like, well, why are we doing these things? Oh, well, the audience likes it. It was like, well, or is it that, or is it because you like it? And as a marketeer, is that I'm quite used to being dispassionate about the audience. But when it's your own baby, your company, if it's an SME, then it can be quite hard to think of it a bit more dispassionately. So that is a big difference. As a marketing professional, I find it was much more easier for us to think in the audience's shoes because we're trained to do that. And that's not something that comes naturally.
Yeah, I end up seeing that a lot. I'm not a fractional CMO, but on the copywriting side, I'll show up and the less experienced clients working with copywriters or top of funnel copywriters like me is like, here's everything we want to say. Please figure out the best way to say it. And I said, like, nope, those are 2 steps, but they're not the first 2 steps. Like, my job is to find something that someone would be interested in reading or hearing about, and then saying that, and then telling them sort of, your story, telling them about you in their story, not trying to get them to sit still while you talk about yourself. And so, but it's exactly right. Like, it's all like outbound, but nobody thinks about the receiver who has all the money that we want, right? Yes. How about you? What do clients normally sort of not see or not know about until you start working with them?
So, like Pete said, sometimes the audience is one of the things that I deal with straight away. I usually find a mismatch. I find a lot, especially with first-time founders, more than with experienced founders, that they're very emotionally attached to their idea, and they have this preconception of that, oh, I'm building this for this, I'm building this problem, and that this is why they need it, without actually ever doing any sort of product market research or even if they've gotten some sort of confirmation bias in them, but they don't usually do that. So it's very difficult to actually pivot them and say this is a better audience, or they haven't done, or this is a wrong audience to begin with. The main thing is that I usually focus on is the interactions and the actual journey that potential audiences will take. So a lot of the things that they don't know is exactly, okay, so they have an audience, but how does that audience interact with them to the point to get to a sale? And that's something that they don't usually know. They just say, oh, let's target an audience. Obviously, they'll see what our unique selling point is because we're amazing, and they'll get it straight away, but they don't understand how that progression that it takes from introducing yourself to a client to the point where they now are ready to go to a sales team to make an actual sale. And that's usually something that they learn as I go through the strategy with them.
Okay, so you just brought up how that's one of the things that they start learning. Like, what should a CEO understand about fractional CMOs if they want to get squeeze the last % of maximum value out of one?
So
go ahead, Yes.
All right. So I would say that fractional CMOs, because they're only there part-time, is a lot of trust. Yeah. So I would say 2 things are key. First of all, be collaboration. Make sure that they have the resources that they need. Trust them with that and collaborate with them as much as possible. Because I in the time that I could build out whatever it is, but in the time that I'm not working for that company, the company needs to be able to continue doing what they need to do. And so there is a lot of collaboration. I would say, from a relationship point of view, meet the actual fractional CMO in person at least once, periodically, because you really do need to trust them. And remote sort of relationships don't have that same level of trust, especially as if you want to accomplish what Pete was mentioning before, that you need to kind of get them away from this I'm handling marketing to giving it to sort of handing that off. Trust is a big part of that.
So I would say meet someone in person.
I would say meet your fractional CMO in person.
A lot of fractional CMOs are not going to like that advice. Yes.
No, it doesn't have to be every day, but at least once.
Even once,
At least once, especially if you're dealing with a very, very complicated product.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And Pete, how about you? What how does a CEO sort of get maximum value from a fractional CMO?
For me, and something that I've actually had to stop working with people because they didn't do this because they're not going to get enough value. Is that the idea of a fractional CMO versus a marketing director, for example, is that it's supposed to be an internal member of your team. So being on the C-suite means that they're almost a shadow board member. So therefore, and this I can't underline more, for any CEO working with fractional CMO, the more information you can share, the better. Tell me what the investor 5-year yield expectations are. And I can work that backwards to get you a CPA, to get you your conversion rate targets. Like there's plenty of ways of working back from all the high level information. But if you keep that and don't tell me, we are spinning the wheel of fortune to try and hit your company objectives. So for me, I've always had and I openly say this, I've always had the philosophy that the only information you should not be sharing with your CMO, fractional or otherwise, is the remuneration of you yourself and maybe your CFO, right? Is that nearly everything else that you can share should be shareable. I understand if you want to keep your, the cost of your Malibu mansion to yourself, that's fine. But everything else in the business should be shared because marketing is a mathematics game at the end of the day. And if all that data isn't shared, it's very hard to be making the correct decisions. And 6 months down the line, you'll find that we've not quite gone in the direction that the business needed because the right information wasn't given.
Well, in that case, Pete, what are do you sort of look for any signs that like this client should not have hired a fractional CMO, or this company was not ready for a fractional CMO yet? What are the signs of that?
Yeah, for me, no interest in, because obviously it's an investment for a fractional CMO. It's cheaper than a permanent CMO. A permanent CMO, that's the idea. But there is also still variable marketing costs to take into account. And if there's no interest or no preparedness for the investment that will be needed in whatever it might be, PR, paid search, SEO, whatever, and just talk of, we'll do viral marketing, we'll do social media for free. That for me is, it means the business isn't ready to do serious marketing, in which case you don't need a CMO. What you need is an intern. So for me, that's a huge sign if the business isn't ready for marketing investment, aside from hiring someone to help.
How about you, Yiz? How do you know? What are the red flags that somebody's not, or a company's not ready for a fractional CMO?
Yeah, I have two main red flags that I've kind of learnt the hard way. The first one is that they either won't allow you to bring on your own execution team, or they won't hire their own executioners. Fractional CMO is not meant to be the person in the weeds doing and implementing all the strategy.
Right, sure.
So in that case, they just need either an agency or some sort of part-time freelancer. So if they aren't ready to make that investment into the execution of whatever you're bringing, whatever the strategy is, they're not ready for any type of fractional. I would say they're probably not even ready for a full-time. Definitely not. The other one was that they are very, I would say, tactically driven, in the sense where, kind of like what Pete was saying about let's do viral marketing, but it's more like let's try ABM, let's try what about SEO, what about paid. They're very focused on the particular tactics rather than letting you decide the direction that, or presenting the direction that the company needs to go for, and present the actions and then recommend the actual tactics that you want in order to achieve that goal. If they're very much like let's do this, let's do that, they're very much shiny object, and they're not people that going to be easy to work with.
Okay, I have. I've never asked this question on the podcast before, but someone, a fractional CMO that is also a client, or rather, she brought me in, and her client is my client, so to speak. She talked about hiring a project manager, and that reminded me, as I spent a long time as a senior project manager, hired project managers, and had them work for me, and so on. It reminded me of something I used to tell clients and employers. I said there are basically two ways to think about a project manager. it's either revenue neutral, you will pay them, but they'll save you enough money that it zeroes out. So basically, you get the management for free. Or depending on their background and how you like let them loose and the kind of project manager person that they are, they can actually generate a lot more money than you pay them. So if we were going to apply that to fractional CMOs, do you think the typical fractional CMO engagement is a company breaking even, like they either save or generate enough revenue to pay for themselves, or should it be like a multiplier effect? And if it's a multiplier effect, what kind of person is that? Pete, let's start with you.
Okay, yeah. It's a great question. I've always right. I'll give two answers quickly.
Okay.
Traditionally, I've always thought of it as a revenue generator. Until somewhat recently in my career with the state of the economy in various different markets that we're working in. It used to be that growth was great. But with inflation running at 10% in a lot of economies, with the cost of doing business rising, just holding at 0% can sometimes be a massive win. If you can turn around and say, you were falling last year by 60% and now you're at zero, like that's great growth. That's value delivered. So sometimes, yeah, there might be so many patches in the ship that it's going down, and therefore it just filling the gaps will do it. Obviously, having a multiplier effect is the traditional model, and that's great. But a lot of businesses, I think, are finding at the moment that, in shrinking markets, particularly those that are related to consumers, are struggling quite a lot. Is just holding things steady is being inventive by itself, because just to have 0% growth, you have to come up with some novel ideas and new ways of pushing forward.
Right.
So yeah, I've changed my view slightly on that.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. How about you, Yiz? Break even, multiplier.
So I would say that like what Pete said, if a company is losing, then getting them to a break-even point, I would consider that a form of growth, even.
Mm-hmm.
But a fractional CMO should be a multiplier. They should have they're supposed to bring in something. They're supposed to bring in key experiences within that industry that can help a company avoid a lot of the costly mistakes that they would have made with a general CMO or with somebody who doesn't have that level of experience. So you're getting one of the joys of a fractional CMO is that you're getting somebody very, very experienced in that industry who has that experience of bringing your company either from startup to scale up or to whichever sort of scale that you want to grow, or to even just keep them running. You're getting somebody who has that experience doing that, and you're getting them for a fraction of the time, so you're also not bearing the full load of the cost of having that heavily experienced person the entire way. So in that sense they should be a multiplier. You should not be making the same mistakes that you would have made without that person or with a less
Right.
experienced
Or with the
fractional
CEO as
CMO.
the head of marketing, yeah.
Or if the CEO is the head of marketing, you're avoiding a lot of unnecessary costs. I think, as Pete mentioned before, the whole turning the wheel of fortune, the random acts of marketing, you shouldn't have any of that. So it will say as that, even without the creativity, it should already save you at that point there, and you should have a much more efficient marketing expenditure uses and much more efficient campaigns from that experience. But their job is to scale acquisition and scale business, to scale business awareness as well, and that should be at some sort of multiplier.
Okay. All right, guys. So this has been really helpful. Thank you. You've got some details on the screen, but we'll start with you, Yiz. How should people, what's your preferred way for people to reach out to you, and who should be reaching out to you?
Sure. You can reach out to me from LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn's probably the best way to reach out to me. People that should reach out to me are sort of startup, early stage startups, heavy tech in industrial manufacturing, in sort of the industrial space, usually with some sort of hardware involved with it. So around product market fit, around either before product market fit or around product market fit is usually the sweet spot that I deal with.
Cool. And then Pete, your website is on the screen, but how should people get in touch with you, and who would sort of get the most value out of getting in touch with you? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you can reach out using the websites on the screen. Also, you can reach me on LinkedIn, Pete Jarvis. The kind of people that should reach out, as I mentioned before, I heavily focus on e-commerce, digital. So national or international brands that have got initial sales with either consumer or B2B. And are looking to grow forward in more technical areas that might be difficult to get your head around if you did it yourself, or very expensive and very error prone to do it yourself. So yeah, the examples would be I've got some sales from referrals, but I would love to do some paid search or some SEO. Those kind of people reach out and we can have a chat.
All right. Now, thank you very much again, guys. This will air if you're watching this. This was recorded in one of the very last days of 2023. And so this is like Thursday of the last week of the year. So I really appreciate you guys taking time from sort of like the general holiday season to join me here today. And it was great to talk to you again. And to everyone watching.